everybody! Today, Honey is going to continue reading Wayside School Gets a Little Stranger, written by Louis Shacker and illustrated by Tim Houch. Chapter 28 Flowers for a Very Special Person. Of course, Miss Norgard knew all about Louis's. The children's brains were buzzing about him. Louis likes Miss Norgard, thought Stephen. Louis is in love with Miss Norgard, thought Todd. Louis wants to marry Miss Norgard, thought Sherry. But even if she couldn't listen to their brains, she would have found out anyway. Louis, the yard teacher, is madly in love with you, said Jenny. Oh, really? Said Miss Norgard. He dreams about you every night, said Calvin. He thinks your eyes are like the moon, said Bibi. Miss Norgard smiled. Do you like him? Said Jenny. He's kind of cute, said Miss Norgard. Ooh, Bibi and Calvin said together. How about his mustache? Asked Jenny. Do you like his mustache? Miss Norgard thought a moment. It would probably tickle if he kissed me. The children gasped as their mouths fell open. They returned to their desks and told everyone around them that Miss Norgard said. Miss Norgard smiled. She wondered just how she'd break Louis's heart. Ever since Xavier broke her heart, she'd become an expert at breaking other people's. She listened to men's brains and knew just what to say to make them fall in love with her. And then she knew just the right thing to say at just the right moment to shatter their hearts into a million pieces. Even the biggest and strongest man would cry like a baby. She was incapable of love. Her heart was clogged with bitterness and hate. Besides, she knew no one could ever love someone with 3 years. For just a second, she felt a pang of sadness because she really did think Louis was kind of cute, like a puppy dog. She could almost feel the tickle of his mustache. Miss Norgard thinks you're cute, Jenny told Louis at recess. She's hot for you, Louis, said Mac. She wants to kiss you, said Bibi. Come on, let's play kickball, said Louis. They played kickball, but it was weird. Louis, who was probably the best kickball player ever, did terribly. He tripped over the ball when he tried to kick it. And then Terence kicked the pop up. Louis tried to catch it, but the ball bounced off his head. What's wrong, Louis? Said Ron. Is he sick or something? Yes, said Jenny. He's got a real bad disease, and it's spelled Love. The next morning, Louis came to school with a bunch of flowers in his hand. Jenny saw him. Are those for Miss Norgard? She asked. Oh, I don't know, said Louis. I passed a field of wildflowers on the way to school. I thought I might give them to someone special. He winked at her. He headed toward the school building. Jenny followed. Ooh, flowers, said Bibi. Are you going to give them to Miss Norgard? Asked Calvin. Oh, I don't know, said Louis. I think she might have a pretty vase. Louis, Calvin, and Bibi followed along with Jenny. Louis entered the building. Miss Norgard was in the office. She was getting her mail from her box. Her back was to him. Louis froze. Go on, Louis, urged Jenny. But Louis just stood there. The flowers rattled in his shaky hand, and several petals fell to the floor. Mr. Kidgewater came out of his office. Good morning, Louis, he said. What have you got there? Oh, these are for you, said Louis. He thrust his flowers into Mr. Kidgewater's hand. They're lovely, said Mr. Kidgewater. Miss Norgard turned around. Those are very pretty, Mr. Kidgewater, she said, and headed up the stairs. Louis watched her go. No one's ever brought me flowers before, said Mr. Kidgewater. You may not believe this, Louis, but I don't have many friends. He put his hands on Louis's shoulder. You're like a son to me, he said, and you're a maggot-infested string bean, muttered Louis. What? Asked Mr. K. I said, you're a magnificent human being. Chapter 29. Stupid. Did anyone have any troubles with the homework? Asked Miss Nogard. They all shook their heads. Ron shook his head too. Homework? He thought. What homework? Good, said Miss Nogard. Well, in that case, there won't be any homework tonight. Everyone cheered. Let's just quickly go over the answers, she said. Ron, what's your answer to question 1? Ron's stomach flipped over. He fumbled with his notebook. Just a second, he said. That's okay, we'll wait, said Miss Nogard. Ron flipped through the pages. What question are we on? He asked. Question 1, said Miss Nogard. I couldn't get that one, said Ron. Oh, said Miss Nogard. Well, that's okay, Ron, as long as you tried. Who knows the answer to question 1? A handful of hands went up in the air. 7 lima beans, thought Jason. 7 lima beans, thought Phoebe. 6 cucumbers, thought Dee. 7 lima beans, thought Stephen. Miss Nogard called on Dee. 6 cucumbers, Dee said proudly. No, I'm sorry, said Miss Nogard. The answer was 7 lima beans. Ooh, I had that, thought Jason. She should have called on me, thought Rondi. Dee is stupid, thought Stephen. Okay, question 2, said Miss Nogard. Ron, did you get that one? Ron squirmed in his seat. He flipped through his paper. What question are we on? He asked. Question 2, said Miss Nogard. I couldn't get that one either, said Ron. Miss Nogard looked at him a moment. Okay, who knows the answer to question 2? Abraham Lincoln's hat, said Todd. Abraham Lincoln's hat, said Joy. Abraham Lincoln's hat, said Phoebe. George Washington's left shoe, said Calvin. Yes, Calvin, said Miss Nogard. George Washington's left shoe, said Calvin. No, I'm sorry, said Miss Nogard. The answer was Abraham Lincoln's hat. I knew it, said Todd. Calvin's stupid, said Joy. Ron, did you get the answer to number 3? Asked Miss Nogard. Ron shook his sorry little head. He wished he had just told her the truth, but it was now too late. Anyone? Asked Miss Nogard. Chairs and bears, said Benjamin. Goats and goats, said DJ. Chairs and bears, said Mac. Chairs and bears, said Dee. Miss Nogard called on DJ. Coach and goat? He said hopefully. No, chairs and bears, said Miss Nogard. What an idiot, said Benjamin. Question 4, said Miss Nogard. Run! And so it went. Miss Nogard went through the entire homework assignment, and nobody gave a correct answer. I'm very disappointed, she said when she was finished. You obviously didn't understand this, so I'm afraid I'm going to have an assigned homework tonight after all. Everyone groaned. I don't like it any better than you do, said Miss Nogard, but it's for your own good. She assigned 3 pages of homework, plus they had to do yesterday's homework over again as well. But nobody blamed Miss Nogard. They liked her. She didn't even want to give homework. They blamed each other. It's not fair, said Benjamin. I only missed one problem, but I have to do extra homework because everyone else is so stupid. It was the same all around the room. No one missed more than 2 problems. Everyone thought everyone else was stupid. Miss Nogard smiled as she listened to their thoughts. I hate Joe, said John. I hate Calvin, said Phoebe. I hate Joy, said Maricia. I hate Allison, said Randy. And everyone hated Ron. Wayside School was Chapter 30, The Little Stranger. Wayside School was no fun anymore. Hey, out of my way, Buster, said Dee as she pushed out Ron on her way to her seat. Hey, keep your hairy paws to yourself, said Ron. Nobody had any friends. Everybody hated everybody, except Miss Nogard. They all liked her. But then a miracle happened. A new kid came to school. The new kid couldn't talk. She had no teeth. She was almost bald. She was beautiful. Her name was Mavis Jules. She was only 4 days old. She was really a new kid. Mrs. Jules carried her into the classroom, and when the baby came through the door, all the hate flew out the window. Louis came in behind them carrying a bassinet, a diaper bag, and an assortment of toys and baby bottle. It's Mrs. Jules and her baby, Todd exclaimed. Louis set the bassinet on Todd's desk. Mrs. Jules gently laid her baby down on it on soft yellow blankets. Everyone crowded around the little stranger. Look at her totally tiny toes, Baby squealed. Aren't those the cutest things you've ever seen in your whole life? Check out her nose, said Myron. Oh, she's so beautiful, Mrs. Jules, said Joy. Can I touch her? Sure, said Mrs. Jules. They took turns touching the baby. Goo goo, goo goo, said Mac as he gently shook Mavis's little hand. Wiggle, iggy wiggle, poo poo, said Allison, tapping her on the nose. Iggle wiggle, poo poo poo, said Rondi, tickling her foot. Yibble bibble, said Todd. Oh, goo goo boo boo, cooed Joe. She's never going to learn to talk around you, kid, said Mr. Jules with a laugh. Dinah was so happy she cried. She hugged Mrs. Jules. They all took turns hugging Mrs. Jules. Of course, there was one person who weren't happy. May I hold her, Mrs. Jules? Miss Noggart asked sweetly. Mrs. Jules looked at her substitute teacher. It's okay, said Allison. Miss Noggart's a real nice teacher. Sure, go ahead, said Mrs. Jules. I'm sorry for interrupting your class like this. Oh, that's quite all right, said Miss Noggart, picking up Mrs. Jules's baby. She's just adorable. The window by Sherry's desk was wide open. That kind of danger, said Miss Noggart realized. Somebody might accidentally drop something out of the window. She slowly moved toward it as she swayed with the baby. I've heard so much about you, Mrs. Jules, she said. The children have missed you. I've missed them too, said Mrs. Jules. There was a rubber band ball on the floor next to Sherry's desk. Sherry had been making it, so it was nearly as big as one Mr. Kidwater had been making. If I tripped over that rubber band ball, something awful might happen, said Miss Noggart. She was just about to step on it when suddenly she became very curious about the kind of such babies had. She had never listened a baby spraying before. Miss Noggart held Mavis close to her heart and listened. She gasped. Her face turned white. Her legs wobbled beneath her. As she tried to get her balance, she stepped on the rubber band ball and fell towards the open window. Liz jumped over Sherry's desk and grabbed her just in time. Mrs. Jules hurried over. Miss Noggart tenderly handed Mrs. Jules her baby. Then she fainted in Liz's arms. It was impossible to describe in words exactly what Miss Noggart heard when she listened to Mavis's brain. Babies don't think in words. Miss Noggart heard pure love and trust and faith, with no words to get in the way. It was a love so strong that it dissolved all the bitterness she had been caked around her heart. She opened her eyes. Are you all right, Miss Noggart? Asked Stephen. All the children were very worried about her. Miss Noggart smiled at Louis, who was still holding her. I'm fine, she said, then took a couple of steps to steady herself. In fact, I think I'm better than I've been in a long time. She laughed. That hugged Stephen. You should feel very proud of your class, she told Mrs. Jules. They're very bright, well-behaved, and just a pleasure to teach. We are? Asked Mauricia. Miss Noggart fluffed Miss Mauricia's hair. Yes, you are, she said. Mauricia smiled up at her. I know, said Mrs. Jules. As I told my obstetrician. Your what? Asked Joy. Obstetrician, said Mrs. Jules. That's the doctor who helped me have my baby. Then once the baby is born, she gets a new doctor. The doctor is called a pediatrician. It's different from a podiatrician, who is a doctor who cares of people's feet. There are many different kinds of doctors. There is also a Todd raised his hand. Mrs. Jules, you're starting to get a little boring, he said. Mrs. Jules made Todd write his name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Hey, Louis, shouted Matt. Ask Miss Noggart out on a date. Everyone looked at Louis. Miss Noggart looked at him too. Do it, Louis, said Leslie. I really want to know you better, Miss Noggart, he said. Ooh, said Paul and Leslie. Well, way to go, Louis, cheered DJ. Call me Wendy, said Wendy Nogard. Ooh, said Bibi and Calvin. Okay, Wendy, said Louis. You can call me Louis. I already do, said Wendy. She smiled at him. He smiled back. So what do you say? He asked. Would you like to go out sometime? Miss Nogard hesitated. Say yes, Miss Nogard, urged Jenny. Miss Nogard took a deep breath. I like you, Louis, she said, but I think there is something you should know about me first. She bent over and parted her hair on top of her head. Everyone crowded around as she tried to get a good look. It's an ear, shouted Jason. Yes, it's an ear, said Miss Nogard. Cool, said Terence. Can I touch it? Asked Dana. Everyone took turns touching her ear. The one on top of her head, I mean. So, Louis, are you sure you still want to go out with me? She asked. Louis held her hands in his. I like you a lot, she said. It doesn't matter how many ears you have. He paused for a second. How many ears do you have? Just 3, she assured him. I think your ears are beautiful, said Louis. I think your nose and eyebrows are beautiful. Miss Nogard didn't have to read Louis's mind to know he was telling the truth. She could see it in his eyes. His eyes were like the moon. She kissed him. His mustache tickled. Everybody wooed. The end.